This video is about an experiment I conducted in a notoriously haunted building in Dallas, Texas. Is it common for behavior analysts to study paranormal phenomena? Heck no! But if you believe the eyewitness accounts from employees and past guests who have stayed at this hotel, the Adolphus might have a serious problem with ghost behavior. I'm talking about things like turning the taps on when no one's there, playing big band music late at night, shouting people's names, and even making the elevator dangerous. By all accounts, this place was creepy. So, who are you gonna call? That's right, me. Never mind the fact that I don't believe in ghosts. Like I said before, behavior analysts don't commonly investigate the paranormal. Instead, we have a proud history of applying the principles of behavior to help individuals reach a higher quality of life. For example, this includes providing early intensive behavioral intervention to kids with autism, helping students improve their academic performance, increasing the productivity and job satisfaction of employees, working with athletes to reach the top of their croquet game, or other sports, I guess, and many, many other successful, socially significant interventions. I'm proud of the successes we've had as a field. Our successes in these domains notwithstanding, I also have a deeply held personal value, and that is to apply the science of behavior to solve unusual problems and to help underserved populations. So what about weird subjects like plants and the undead? Yup, count me in. But Brendan, you may ask, why do a functional assessment on a ghost? To answer that question, and believe me, it is a good question, first, I need to explain why we would do a functional assessment on anyone, or anything. As a behavior analyst, I want to make people's quality of life better by analyzing their environment and helping them change their behavior patterns. My goal is to raise the long-term quality of life for the individuals I support and the community they're a part of. If I'm supporting an individual with a recent history of challenging or problem behavior, this means I want at least two things to happen. I want the problem behavior to happen less often, and I want them to use adaptive skills instead or more often. Now, I'm not just going to go home and sit in my comfy chair until I come up with a really good idea, and then pull out a bunch of instructions and give them to someone else and say, hey, do this. I went to school. I know what to do. I'm an expert. No, no, no. This isn't amateur hour. This is professional o'clock. Typically, a proper functional assessment is done in two stages. First step is to gather preliminary information about the problem. This includes interviewing caregivers and observing the individual in their natural environment if possible. In this step, I should be able to find out, amongst other things, what the problem is, how often it occurs and when, and some indication of why the problem might be happening, although I can't be certain yet. Using this information, I will come up with a hypothesis of why the behavior continues to happen, and that is what I will use in the second step, where I actually conduct an experimental analysis to confirm or disprove my hypothesis. Okay, back to the undead. No, not that undead. Yes, that undead. Okay, so here's the story about the ghost of the Adolphus Hotel. In 1912, the hotel was built by Adolphus to be the most luxurious hotel imaginable. It was the tallest building in Dallas for many years. In 1922, a young couple was to be married in the hotel's glamorous ballroom on the 19th floor. However, according to legend, the groom-to-be never showed up, and the bride was left at the altar. That night, overcome with grief, she went up to the ballroom and hanged herself. And now she's a ghost! Most reports of the paranormal activities in this building are from the 19th floor, which is where the ballroom used to be. Now, it's just more hotel rooms. She's blamed for all kinds of weird goings-on at the hotel, including turning the taps on, ringing the telephones, playing big band music late at night, cracking glass, moving things around, shouting people's names, and even making the elevators act weird. The objectives I had for this ghost project were: describe the problem, so that means the ghost problem behavior, experimentally determine what the function of that ghost behavior is, and then to teach the ghost new, more adaptive skills. And I think this is a good time to remind everyone that I do not believe in ghosts. Seriously, just saying. Phase 1 is to conduct functional assessment interviews with caregivers. I used the structured functional assessment interview developed by Dr. Gregory Hanley. It is important to remember that this interview was not developed for use with the undead. It was made for children. The full interview contains 20 long answer questions. Here are just 4 examples to give you an idea. Number 6 was, what is the single most concerning problem behavior? Number 7, what are the top 3 most concerning problem behaviors? Are there other problem behaviors of concern? Number 16, what do you and others do to calm him or her down once he or she engaged in the problem behavior? Number 19, do you think this problem behavior is a form of self-stimulation? If so, what gives you that impression? So the first caregiver I met with, the first interviewee I met with, was the front desk agent. She was a believer. Some of the behaviors she described were turning on the taps when no one was around, moving objects around, making the phones ring, leaving indentations on pillows when someone rolls over, playing big band music from no source at all on the 19th floor, and messing around with the elevators, that is, making them knock around side to side, up and down, or making creepy sounds on the way down. Her hypothesis was that the ghost was engaging in these behaviors in order to spread the legend so more people would know about her and be scared of her. The second interviewee I met with was a valet. He was a non-believer. Some of the behaviors he described, observing or hearing from others, were generally making people feel scared, seeing things out of the corner of one's eyes, and of course, messing around with the elevators in the same way. I met with the third interviewee at this hotel's excellent bar. No, not the fancy bar. Yes, this is the bar. The third interviewee was the bartender. She said people reported a general fear. She was a believer. She said that sometimes guests will leave the hotel without even knowing anything about the haunting because they just feel uncomfortable and scared. Sometimes people will hear their names being called quietly. And she herself reported that one lonely night about a decade ago when she was locking up the bar all by herself, she heard a man shout her name very loudly from right behind her, and no one was there, and the doors were locked. Oh, and she also reported screwing with the elevators. In addition to the spreading the legend hypothesis, she thought that the ghost might be embarrassed and ashamed of her suicide, and she might simply be trying to escape from the 19th floor, which is why this spooky elevator activity only happens when it's descending from the 19th floor. After finishing up the interviews, I reviewed my notes. Many problem behaviors were described by the interviewees that I met with, but one was obviously the most consistent issue, messing around with the elevators, that is, spooky elevator activity. I selected this as the primary target behavior. How frequently did this behavior occur? Anywhere between 2 months and 10 years is what they said, so not very frequent. And what are the common antecedents? Well, in that area there is only one consistency. Spooky elevator activity apparently only happens when descending from the 19th floor. So I developed some hypotheses. 1. The ghost's spooky elevator activity is maintained by the high emotional responding, i.e. fear, that it elicits from elevator passengers. 2. Spooky elevator activity is maintained by additional people talking about her behavior, thereby spreading the legend. Or 3, it's maintained by escape from the 19th floor by descending on the elevator and then presumably leaving the building. Phase 2. It is time for the experimental functional analysis. I decided to include a trigger analysis component in our functional analysis. This is because the spooky elevator activity is simply too infrequent for direct observation or direct experimentation. Trigger analysis simply means that we will evoke the behavior systematically according to the hypotheses that we have generated. The procedure is as follows. We needed 3 Confederates, which required me to recruit one new one from the bar. One Confederate would stay on the 19th floor, another one would be the experimenter traversing downwards on the elevator, and the third one would be in the lobby waiting for someone to get out. Before getting into the elevator on the 19th floor, our Confederate would make a grand announcement to whoever was in the hallway, which was never anybody, that they were about to leave. They were going to go all the way down to the lobby and they're going outside. And they'd hold the door open and say, "Does anyone want to join me?" And then they'd head off. If they detected spooky elevator activity, that's horizontal side-to-side motion or up and down motion or spooky elevator sounds, they were instructed to act fearful. That's afraid. We want the ghost to know that she's making us scared. And when they get out on the lobby floor, they need to tell the Confederate about their experience. Remember, we need to spread the legend. And of course, the lobby Confederate will take data, and the person staying on the 19th floor will wait there all alone, which is kind of creepy, actually. So it looked something like this. After announcing their departure from the 19th floor, they would descend, and then if there's no spooky elevator activity, they'd head back up to try it again. If on the way down, however, there was some spooky elevator activity, then they're supposed to act afraid and talk about their experience and kind of just be scared and get out of there. So we carried out the procedure several times and we collected some data and we found something very interesting. Nope, just a joke. There was no spooky elevator activity. We observed zero ghost behavior, which means that we had zero experimental data, and that meant we have no way to determine the function, which would make it very difficult to identify and teach more appropriate replacement skills for the ghost. Despite some obvious differences between this functional analysis and the sort usually conducted by behavior analysts, including that this one was with a ghost rather than with a child who is, well, actually real, there were actually some interesting similarities. For example, during all of my interviews, I was told that the challenging behavior seems to happen out of nowhere. There is no antecedent that they could be aware of, nothing consistent. This is also very common when interviewing human beings about other human beings. All interviewees reported very different frequencies and intensities of behavior. Again, this is common when interviewing caregivers about their children or those they support. And just like with many other functional assessment interviews that you might do with regular human beings, these ones were long, drawn-out processes that very frequently went off topic. It took a lot of time. And it was very common for interviewees to attribute observations in general to private, unobservable causes. For example, while I was interviewing the front desk agent, the credit card reader stopped working. She very quickly said that it was probably because of the ghost, because we were talking about the ghost and she was upset. And while I was interviewing the bartender, the music on the radio suddenly started to skip for about 10 seconds. Again, the bartender thought that it might be because of the ghost, because we were talking about her in a way that she didn't like. I'd like to thank my second Confederate, David Kelly III, who is a doctoral student at the Florida Institute of Technology and who is specializing in organizational behavior management. Thank you very much.